All right.
I don't have my headphones on. I can't hear squat.
All right. You hear me now?
Yeah, I can. I just didn't put my headphones on. So.
All right, we're good.
Cool. All right. So today's topic: the Trump's tax plan is mostly bad, but has one good quality. So I tend not to say anything is all bad. So I put that on there. Maybe it has more than one good quality. We'll see. But I created this resolution at my opponent's request, who was looking to argue one of a number of topics. So I thought this one would be interesting. So there's no single tax plan, I should note, to anyone who's watching this at this moment, at least. There's a plan that was passed by the House, which is my main source for any specifics that I'm talking about. There's one being debated in the Senate currently. Trump didn't, as far as I know, authorize or create any of these plans in particular himself. They're just plans that he supports, and he's looking for tax reform. So some of the general principles, he's behind those. But we're going to put his name on it because he puts his name on things. That's kind of what he does for a living. So why not? It's his tax plan, whether he actually made it or not. So let's. I wanted to go down what I thought were the key elements of these plans, and then if there's some more you want to add, you can feel free to bring those up. These are just what my research turned up. So let's see. They lower tax revenue overall. So the House plan lowers revenue compared to the current plan by somewhere between 1.4 to 2.4 trillion dollars over 10 years. So that's 100 to 200 billion dollars a year. They would reduce the projected revenues from the current tax system. They eliminate a large number of personal tax deductions and limits that and limit others that you can take. So there's a lot less things that you can claim on itemized deduction, and the other things that you can still claim have different lower limits at which you can claim them. They double the standard deduction that you can take when you're not itemizing your deductions. They lower the corporate tax rate and the pass-through tax rate for businesses fairly significantly. They don't change business deductions like they do with personal taxes for the most part. They switch the U.S. business tax code to be territorial so that U.S. businesses are only taxed on their income that they earn inside of the U.S. As it was, they're taxed, I believe, at a slightly different rate on business operations that they have in other countries, so long as it's owned by them. They remove taxation for moving money from offshore to U.S. accounts, although the House bill has sort of a one-time tax assessment.
10%,
yeah, something like that. But then after that, they make it more liquid so that you can move assets back into the U.S. that you earned overseas. They offer, and that's probably the most complicated part of the tax plan, so I don't know all the details. They offer a lower rate for moving existing money offshore into the U.S. Again, that kind of varies a little bit from plan to plan. There are new tax breaks for corporations, such as deducting the cost of equipment for the first 5 years of the tax plan, but that phases out. Then normally those are done through depreciation instead of a direct credit. They eliminate the sales tax after a while. At first they just put a higher cap on it, but then they get rid of it entirely after about 5 years. They eliminate the alternative minimum tax, which is kind of designed to hit people who otherwise have a large number of deductions. Yeah, the AMT. And they're fiddling around with the tax brackets, although none of what I've seen, I would call any of that fiddling to be especially significant, right? It just the House plan reduces it from 7 brackets to 5 brackets. They raise the lowest bracket a little bit. I think the Senate plan lowers the top one, but keeps the 7 in place and maybe fiddles around with the ones in between a little bit, but not a lot of big changes there. So the net result, most of the tax cuts go to corporations and business owners rather than personal taxpayers. Now, if you're a personal taxpayer who pays pass-through on your private business, then it definitely could affect you. Middle-class income families will maybe pay a little more, some will pay a little less. Really depends on how much of those itemized deductions you used and which ones you used. Those in the lowest brackets, at least in the short term, are generally gaining a little bit because the double standard deduction, which is what most low-income people use, is going to compensate for, say, the loss of personal exemptions and things like that, which are also out in the House plan. So that's the general breakdown and kind of the shakeout of it. Plus, there is a lot of theorized benefits about what it's going to do for businesses or not do, especially based on the localization thing. So my issues with it that I do not like, we're making, my main one, I'll talk about the most, is that we're making the deficit worse by cutting revenue. And furthermore, too, that we're trying to stimulate an economy that's already very strong and is already on a growth trajectory and this could lead to inflationary pressures and higher interest rates, things like that. Most of the money goes to those who are already quite wealthy, with about 50% of the cuts going to about 1% of the population. 4, it's a kind of a supply side policy in an economy that's already heavily weighted on the supply side of the equation. So it favors people who already have a lot of capital and tends to increase the wealth production in the hands of those that are already wealthy, which I don't necessarily think we need more of. I'm not opposed to that. I'm not opposed to people being wealthy. That's fine by me. I just think we don't need more of it necessarily. It does nothing to simplify business taxes or corporate taxes particularly. Now, it may on those offshore accounts, it may have some impact there, but it doesn't get rid of, it doesn't simplify the tax code in the way it does for personal people by eliminating a lot of the special interest deductions and exceptions that you can take. And it provides more havens and loopholes in some ways, because basically any factory and any income that you earn overseas, you don't have to pay tax on, so you can move operations there to avoid taxes. And you have an easier way to bring the money back home. So what I do like about it, it simplifies tax filing for at least for individuals, and encourages less gaming of the system because there's less itemized deductions that you're like, oh, if I want to lower my taxes, I should spend my money like this instead of like that. I really like that very much. I like the idea that, look, there's just a percentage that you pay on any and all different types of income that you get straight up, and that makes things nice and simple and fair. So that aspect of it I like. The rest of it I don't particularly like, especially the fact that we are basically in a time where we're making the debt worse, at a time when we're kind of rolling in money, and we should be using that extra money. We should keep revenue about the same, lower spending, and then pay off the deficit and the debt. That's what we should really be doing. Instead, we're giving a bunch of money to rich people. I don't know why. That's about it.
All right, so just to hop into it, I'm not going to go out there and say myself that I understand the tax plan 100%. That would be a dumb thing to say, as these things, there are people that spend their lives studying these things. They themselves are coming out with new reports every day. So we're just going to go off, obviously, based on what I think we can understand from the plan and from our understanding of basic economics, and obviously applying the studies that have already been done. Now, I really think we should split this into two parts. There's the personal income, the regular person who's working. I have a job, I'm employed, I make money. There's that, and then there's the business. There's the corporate. There's and corporate and business. There are two separate, not issues, two separate things over here. We're both of them. I believe in this tax plan really benefits everybody. Now, as far as there being less tax revenue, obviously that's going to be the outcome of cutting tax rates. I mean, the outcome is going to be the less revenue collected by the government. However, the question is that necessarily bad? On that, I want to bring out 2 points. One, there's something called the Hauser's Law. The Hauser's Law says that and there are a lot of people that disagree with it, but there are a lot of well-known economists that do agree with this, that the federal taxes historically never exceeded 19 to 20% of GDP. Now, some people say it's more 17 to 25%, but there is a direct correlation between GDP and amount of taxes collected, which really shows that if we want to increase the amount of taxes getting collected, we really have to increase GDP. Because if we're without increasing GDP, just upping the tax rate historically shows that doesn't work, because then there's the Laffer's curve. It shows that the production will come down and there will be less there will be less income to collect taxes on. Another note, the federal government collected north of $1 trillion in the first quarter of 2017. I don't think it's a problem of the taxes being collected. I think it's a problem with the spending of the federal government, and that's really what we have to cut back on. And if anybody really looks at a detailed breakdown of the federal government spending, there are a lot of things that I think nonpartisan, bipartisan, I think everybody could agree to, that we can chalk right off. But obviously, there are going to be some things that not everybody agrees to, but I really believe it's a spending issue. Now, that being said, there was a chart based, which was actually on the floor, which the Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, mentioned, which based on the Tax Foundation, which a nonpartisan analysis shows that due to this tax plan, every single person is going to benefit by paying less taxes. And it breaks it down on the 0 to 20%, 20 to 40%, 40 to 80%. And the ones who benefit the most really are those in the lower tax bracket. From 0 to 20%, they're gaining their take home after taxes is going to increase by 4.6%. The 20 to 40% is 4.9%. Then on 40 to 60%, 4.6%. And it goes on, it actually breaks, it's not increments of 20 exactly. Then it goes 60 to 80% is 4.9%. The 80 to 90% increases by 4.8%. And it goes from 90 to 99 to 100. And the 90 to 100 has the smallest increase of their take home after tax money. And that is an average of about 3.8%, 3.75, 3.8%. So everybody is going to be taking home more money. Every single person, their paycheck is going to increase due to this tax plan. Now, when you mentioned that taking away the itemized deductions, which and not only just taking away the itemized deductions, but it's going to be increasing, besides for adding the having a child, the deduction of that, but it's also going to be increasing the standard deduction from a single person, 12,000, married 25,000. That right off the bat, bringing it that they pay zero in taxes. I mean, obviously, is going to be helping out those who are the hardest hit, those who are having the most difficult time in this country. Another thing to note. I know there's a lot of talk from the left and the right where they don't see eye to eye is whether the top 10%, 5%, 1%, top tenth of 1%, as Bernie likes to call it, whether they're paying their fair share in taxes. On that, I want to bring down, there is Mark Perry of the American Enterprise Institute. He writes that the richest 20% of Americans by income aren't just paying a share of federal taxes that would be considered fair. It goes way beyond fair. They're shouldering almost 100% of the entire federal tax burden of transfer payments and all other non-finance government spending. After you take, we're talking about the net, after you deduct what the government programs, whether it's Medicaid, Medicare, whether it's SNAP, whether it's food stamps, after you deduct all of that, the net tax revenue collected, the top 20% are shouldering just about 100% of tax revenue collected. When you take that into account, it really should change the mindset of, are they paying their fair share? Because really, falling in the bottom, lower 80%, they're not really paying any net taxes. It's really the majority is to the top 20%. So yes, they will be getting a lot of, they will be paying at the end of the day a lot less. Or it's not even that much less due to the fact that we're taking away a lot of the loopholes and deductions, which they're able to afford accountants to do, which the lower people in this country like myself can't. But they're really paying everything, so they really, all the deductions should go to them. And again, what we really have to do, they're the ones that are giving the jobs. The person who's making $25,000 or $50,000 a year is not employing anybody. Really, if you want jobs to be created, then the ones that are doing it, and I agree, I'm not here going to say that everybody in the top 10%, 5%, 20% are going to take all of that extra income and put that towards business and expanding, and a lot of it's going to go to yachts and planes. It will. It's their money. They made it. They should be able to spend it as they wish. But they will be hiring more people. And it's not the people, I'm not hiring anybody. If people are making $25,000, $50,000, even $75,000, you're not the ones that are hiring people. So overall, and again, I know you went into more specifics, which I have no problem going into one by one that you didn't like about the plan, but I really wanted to bring across this point that, correct, the top percent, the upper class in this country should be getting more tax rates because that's what stimulates growth.
Well, so we'll start on the bottom a little bit here. I don't know that rich people generally stimulate growth individually or something like, money is money. It circulates around in the economy. To say giving jobs versus doing jobs, which is more important, right? Well, if I give jobs and there's nobody to do the jobs, that doesn't matter. And if I do the job and there's nobody who will hire me and pay me, that doesn't matter. So, it's a relationship. It's an interconnection. You need labor, you need capital in a capitalist economy. You need both of these things to make things go around until we have robots that do all our jobs for us, right? Which someday may come, right? We'll have to figure that out. But for the time being, you need both. You need people who work for a living to be able to make a living, right? That's pretty important. You need people who have capital, who are going to employ other people who have the vision to be capitalists, to be able to have capital and liquidity in order to be able to do these enterprises. So you need a banking system, you need the ability to lend money, and you need people to have money to lend, right? So that's important too. I agree with all that. But I think it's kind of a trap in thinking to say that the only people that matter are the people who create jobs, right? Because creating jobs, you got to have people to buy the products that you're making, the things that you're doing. You got to have money circulate. It's a big circulating. It's a system, right? And you don't want, in this system, you don't want money clogging up one end of the system while there's no money down in the other parts of the economy, right? You want it to churn and move and be fluid, right? So that's what's important. So when I'm concerned about people in the upper income, I don't care much about fair share. I'm not interested in that. What I'm interested in is, well, maybe I care that people who work get paid a reasonable amount for what they work in the economy. But what I'm interested in mostly is just that we have a functional system that moves around, and the people who choose to work for a living can get a reasonable life off their labor, and the people who are capitalists for a living, I'm happy for them to make profits. But and then we need to run the government, which protects this whole system in a multifaceted way. So it needs money in order to operate. I think, looking at the rich people paying their fair share of taxes, after you deduct transfer payments, then the money that's left over in the budget could be handled just by the rich people. I think that's kind of a weird gaming of the numbers. Ultimately, the government does what the government decides it needs to do based on the will of the people. That includes a number of things. I'm sure if you deducted the Department of Defense, the rich people could also pay for all the transfer payments. Or if you deducted, all the employees of the government, then that would be enough money that just the rich people could handle everything. I don't know that has any meaning to it. Rich people pay the most taxes. Why? Because they have the most money. We don't really tax people in truth. We tax money. And if you've got a lot of it, well, we're going to tax you a lot because that's where the money is. You can't bleed a stone, so to speak. Asking poor people to pay taxes doesn't really do you very much because they don't have very much money to give you. So I'm not really concerned about a fair share of who pays how, what percentage. I'm concerned that the government generates enough money to operate, and that nobody is completely put out by the tax system, right? They're not driven to destitution by taxes. That would be a problem, right? So that's kind of my take on that. When it comes to the benefit income by percentage, let's see. Oh, yeah. So you're saying benefits of income by percentage. Well, poor people, oh, yeah, that's right. You were saying that everybody benefits, right, for one. That is not true. All those numbers really said was that every quartile of the income brackets net gains value. But that's not true for every individual within those brackets. So especially within the middle class, if you had a really expensive house and mortgage interest deductions were a major part of your interest. I used to have a very expensive house in Seattle. My mortgage and tax deductions from my property tax were the biggest part of my deduction. Now, my house was over $500,000, so those would go, a certain percentage of that would go away under the system. The more expensive your house is relative to your other sources of income, the more that's true. So some people actually will pay more taxes than they did before. Other people will pay less. It really just depends. But in net, it is a tax cut, right? Nobody's arguing that. That's my main problem, is that it's cutting revenues. But to say every single person, that's not really true. It's just people in every bracket, on average, are yes. I don't, poor people. I mean, if you pay no taxes, a tax cut doesn't do anything for you, right? Unless there are reverse tax income credits, which this gets rid of actually more of those. So there, you can actually get a refund check even though you never paid anything if you're really poor. There's going to be less of that, but more people will pay zero tax. So it's really not the people who pay zero tax that'll benefit. It's the people who now pay a little bit of tax, but because of the double standard deduction, will pay none. They'll become exempt. So yeah, some people benefit definitely. I don't know that you could say that people don't pay any are going to get anything because they already pay zero. You can't do much better than that. When it comes to spending and taxes, yeah, of course, it's a two-sided equation, right? It's just like a family budget, right? There's the income that you come from your job, and there's the money that you spend, right? And you can change both of those equations. If you like a lavish lifestyle, you go make more money. You spend more of your time earning more money, or you get better at your job, whatever it is, you can increase your income. You can also decrease your spending if you don't have control of the income. So you can do both. Now, the government has quite a bit of control over both of these factors. I would say, the sad fact is, and one of my complaints with the Republican Party, I'm not totally anti-conservative, but Republicans piss me off because they're like, well, budget. We got to spend less money. Great. Do they actually spend less money? No. They just like to cut social programs and spend money on the military, right? That's what they usually do. In fact, they usually spend more increases on the military than they do cuts on any of the other programs because it is kind of hard to get cuts. And then what do? They also lower taxes, right, at the same time. If they would just hold the taxes the same and cut spending, I'd be like, wow, the Republicans are the party of fiscal responsibility. But they're not. They're actually the party that tends to spike the deficits up, while the Democrats are actually the ones that tend to kind of slowly erode it over time until some emergency happens, and then they're free with purse strings, right? But over day to day, because what's the difference between them? They both increase spending, right? Let's be honest. But the difference is the Democrats are okay with taxes, right? And they will at least hold them the same, or when they make tax cuts, they're pretty small. But when the Republicans get to make tax cuts, they chop. That's one of the reasons they're popular, because everybody loves to keep more of their money, right? So it's a great political point. But it's terrible for reducing the deficit. So they should shut up about that until they put their money where their mouth is and actually reduce spending. Until they can reduce spending and prove that they're able to make cuts, they should not be allowed to make tax cuts, because they're just screwing up any effort that we ever try to make in order to reduce the deficit. It's terrible. We had a nice balance during the Clinton administration where, Republicans kind of at least held the line on spending, and, Clinton didn't go for drastic tax cuts to try and improve his image and his politics, and we actually reduced the deficit, and we actually had a surplus ever so briefly that we paid off a little bit of debt, and then it was gone, and we're back to what we do now. Terrible. We need to stop that. We're at least during Obama's administration, it started with ridiculous deficits because it was a crisis. I can understand deficit spending in a crisis, but the whole theory is you spend in a crisis, try and stimulate the economy, get it going, prime the pump, as it were, and then you ease off the gas and you let it, and then you let the business cycle take over. And that's exactly what we saw. The economy improved throughout his administration. The deficit went down throughout his administration. And now, now that we're on a nice curve, and maybe we can actually get it down below zero or something, if we cut spending a little bit, which we should, and at least keep the taxes about what they are, we can make progress on this. But if we just go slicing the taxes for, $600 billion a year, and do I believe that Trump is going to cut spending? Where has he done that so far? Almost nowhere, except attacking Obamacare. He wants to build walls. He wants to break trade deals. He wants to spend money on the military and increase the military. I don't see these spending cuts, right? So I don't see any of that happening. I've got a real dim view that that's going to work out. On revenue, you mentioned the Hauser's Law, which is interesting. I've not read a little bit about that. I'm familiar with the Laffer curve, but the problem with the Laffer curve is nobody knows where we're at on the Laffer curve, right? Generally speaking, when we do raise taxes, it does not increase the size of the economy. Generally speaking, when we cut taxes, it does not explode the economy or anything. What happens is the economy generally grows, and tax revenues generally waffle around between whether we cut the taxes or raise the taxes. And politically speaking, you can only raise them so high before everyone, goes apeshit. And you can only take them so low before the government completely explodes. So there's a lot of argument about why Hauser's Law, I think, is what it is. We know that there's a range. We don't know exactly why it's in that range. I just think it's irresponsible to, when you're doing well, it's like, your home financing. You're like, hey, I got a raise today, honey. Great. What should we do? Should we take some of the money and save it for the future? Should we pay off some of our credit card debts? Or should we have a big party? Or should I just work less, right? Great, I got a raise. Let's go to work less. It'll be awesome. Okay, you could do that, but it's not wise when you've got this big, huge debt sitting over there, right? So that's how I feel about it.
All right, so to get on that, because there's a lot said, so I like to go through each at a time. You mentioned, I believe one of the big judges, and I want to start off, first of all, I'm in agreement with you, and I believe that Republican presidents have been horrific, for the most part, not all, at balancing the budget and reducing the deficit. And I agree, and I'm not I'm a conservative, but I'm not one of those people that say, hey, since I vote with somebody who has an R next to their name, that I have to say everything they do is great. I'm not that type of person. I agree with you that 100%. But when it comes to cutting deficits, I know people look at it like as if it's like such a huge thing. It's simple math. It's really not that complicated. There's a disagreement of where to do it, but it's the government is spending X on this, X on that, X on that. What can we throw out? What do we have to pay? What not? We don't want to have a tax and spend federal government like we have some state governments. That's just not the way it was set up. It's not the way it should be set up. It shouldn't be that, oh, hey, we are collecting X amount of taxes. What can we spend it on? It's what is necessary. And part of necessary is also what's really constitutional. I mean, there's a big part of the Constitution of what's allowed to be spent. And up until the 16th Amendment, there was you couldn't even tax income. And there are constitutional scholars on both sides that have this out of what is constitutional and what not. But everybody agrees that the deficit has to be cut, spending has to be cut. As far as Trump, he has cut a lot of spending. I'm going to post a link below, but he has cut spending to a lot of programs. He got a lot of backlash because a lot of people thought that the programs that he cut were actually necessary, which is another debate, whether right or wrong. But fact of the matter is he did cut enormously the amount of spending. But also the boom that we're having now is the trillions of dollars added to our economy from the all markets reaching all-time highs, setting new records day after day. Now, again, I want to go back because there's two things. There's this specific tax plan. Is it good or is it bad? Now, I agree not everything in there is good, and the fact that it cuts out deductions for people that have health issues, I think is not good. There are a lot of things that it cuts out that I'm going to agree are not good. I'm not saying that this plan is all good. The question is, overall, does it put us in a better place than we were yesterday? And that's really what I want to talk about. There are things in there that are great that I think we can agree on. There are things that are bad that we can agree on. The question is, does it put us, the individual person? Yes, there are people, the person who has the $750,000 home in New York or California or anywhere is going to take a hit, correct? And if they're relying on that, they're going to take a hit. I mean, obviously, it also depends what their income is because it might offset each other. But say overall, they're probably going to be taking a hit, and I'll give that. But the fact of the matter is, and as per the Tax Foundation's study, is the average person is going to save just shy of 5%, which is a humongous difference. 5%, taking home 5% more is a big difference. There's a study that shows that the vast majority of Americans don't even have $500 in their bank account for emergencies that come up. This 5% could really eliminate that issue. So I do believe this tax plan does put us in a better position than we were yesterday. Also, on the first thing that you mentioned was going off what I said at the end, which was on Mark Perry's thing that the top 20% are paying almost 100% of the net collected tax revenue. Nothing to do with war, nothing to do with anything of that nature. Just fact of the matter is, people that are making $25,000, $50,000 a year, they're getting benefits. They're getting many government assistance. There are social programs for them. So although you have a person that's making $25,000 a year that was paying X amount in tax, I don't know the exact number, but let's say it was paying $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 in taxes. They are getting that back in social programs. So saying that they're paying in taxes really doesn't do anything if they're getting that back. So what he was pointing out was, the fact of the matter is, the net collected tax revenue is all the net is coming from the top 20%, and he breaks it down of the highest quintile and the fourth quintile, where the highest quintile is paying, I believe it's 46,500 on average, and the The fourth quintile, which is the second highest quintile, $700 on average per person. Is really, and anything under that, there's really no net, and it's actually a loss to the government. That was a study.
Can I jump in on that one?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, just because I don't understand the relevance of it particularly. They have a lot of money, so they pay a lot of taxes.
Oh, no, I agree. I agree. And
so what's the point? I mean,
no. The point is, because when we're debating, and it might not be us in particular, but people on the left and the right often debate that and they're debating whether the bottom quintile, whether it's the first, second, third, whether they're going to be gaining or not, is really irrelevant, because they're not really paying anything to gain or lose. There's no net taxes collected from them, period. They're getting that all back.
Yeah, but I mean, if they got their social programs and they paid less taxes, they'd have more money. I mean, that's.
Yeah, but correct. And if we gave everybody in the bottom three quintiles $100,000 a year, they'd also have more money.
Yeah, totally.
I agree, they'd have more money, but it has to reach a point where you can't just take from one and give it to the next, because they should have more money.
Well, I don't know. Sometimes you do that, but it just depends. I mean, your children, you give money to your children.
That's what social programs are. It's getting done. 100%. It's getting done. There are social programs in America. I'm not saying that America is a total free market economy. It isn't. It's a mixed economy. That's fact of the matter. But that was the reason why I was bringing that up. And I just want one more point, and I'll pass it back over to you. As far as the government spending, you mentioned as far as like war, and despite the fact that they were the Republicans want to cut back on social programs, but then they go and spend the war on the wall, for instance. Here's my stance on government spending as far as that. Any spending that's necessary for the safety for the safety of the American people, for the security of the residents in the United States, spend as much as it takes. Anything that's not necessary, for instance, and I agree, for us to just start a war that has nothing to do with us, on the American taxpayer dollar, I'm against. I'm 100% against. If it's something that has to do with our national security, that has to do with the safety of us, whether it's preemptive or whether it's if we don't go in, and we can debate each one, and there are wars that I agree with, wars that I haven't agreed with, but that as a general rule, my stance as far as the wall, I agree that a country has a right to protect its borders, that every country, including America. So spending on that, besides the fact that there are many reports that say that spending on that will be offset for a number of different reasons, because there are illegals that come in that do collect benefits from the government, and
also pay money
later that shows actually there will be a net gain if we stopped illegal immigration today. Let's say I had a magic wand, was able to stop it. I'll post the link below. I've seen a few reports that say there will be a net gain, but even if there isn't a net gain, that should not just be a monetary decision. That is a safety issue, and when it's a safety issue, it's not just, it doesn't come down just to dollars and cents. But that's not really this debate. And if that's a debate you'd like to have, I mean, we can definitely have that. I really enjoy having these debates. But no, I mean, that was just a general rule when it comes to spending the American government on our foreign policy, so to speak.
Okay. Well, yeah, I'll start at the top here. So I've got a principle that is the government should collect the money it needs to pay the obligations that it's made. So if you make a program and spend X amount of money, you should collect X amount of money so that you can pay for it. That way you don't run into debt. Now, in times of an emergency, say a war or a financial collapse, something along those lines, it's useful to be able to deficit spend. Just like your family, if your car breaks down, you need to get to work. Maybe you need to borrow a little money to get that fixed to keep things continuous. That's great, and then you pay it back later as you earn your money. That's a smart way to run your finances, right? That's the way the government should run their finances. What this tax plan is, hey, I promise we will lower spending sometime later, not on national security, of course, because we always want to be really safe, because that's really important, and not on border security, because we really want to keep the Mexicans out of here. That would be no good if we had Mexicans running around. Not on, give outs to oil companies, because we really want the oil companies to be able to do this, that, blah, blah, blah. There's a whole lot of excuses to why, but the other people that we don't like, the programs we don't support, that's where we're going to cut the stuff, except that everybody else on the other side is going to oppose us, etc. Right? No. Yeah, we're always doing this. We're cutting taxes, and then we pinky swear that we will cut spending later, and they never do. So what we should do is we should max the taxes to the money we're spending so that we collect as much. And then everybody in the country gets to feel the fist of fury of how much money we're spending. And then they can go, finally, maybe I will let go of some of the government programs that politically I hold dear because I'm tired of paying these enormous taxes. Instead, we're giving everybody a cookie and telling them it's all going to be all right because we're going to fix it down the road. It doesn't happen. So I think we've got a serious problem, and that cutting taxes first and magically dealing with the spending later is not the way that you do that. If nothing else, just hold the darn taxes where they are and work on the spending problem. Instead, we're just giving everybody money. Yay, it's fun, give away money. I don't think we should do that. I think we should be responsible and pay for what we've ordered, right, at the restaurant. So if we order lots of government programs, we should pay for lots of government programs, just how it works. So I just have a principle of collect the money you need, and that's what I follow when I'm evaluating good fiscal policy. I agree, absolutely, we should cut money from the budget. We can talk later about where to do that, but you don't get that jump started by cutting taxes. It just doesn't make any logical sense. So let's see, what does it say? Does it put it in a better place? Yeah, does it put us in a better place? I don't think so. It just ramps up the debt. That means we have to pay more money on interest. That erodes our spending power of the government. I don't think any of that's a good idea. And again, we're already on a path of strong economic growth. We have the lowest unemployment in 20 years. It's like 4.something%. It's actually really low. It's near what many people consider full employment. In many parts of the country, it is at full employment. We've got strong growth in the stock market. We've got strong growth in business revenue. We've even got some growth in income now. This is not the time you're like, wow, we really got to stimulate the economy and get more jobs growing. We've got lots of jobs. I agree, more jobs is always better. But this is the time when you be fiscally responsible and you say, great, well, now that everybody's making a lot of money, the taxes will naturally go up, even if we don't change the rates. We're going to use that to bring down the deficit, and we're going to cut some spending because people don't need as much money because they've got jobs now. That's great. So it's a good time to cut on some of that, cut off some of the fat, and get down the debt so that we don't have to pay all the interest payments, and we're more financially secure. There's real security in that as well. So I think that's important. People get 5% more money. Again, yay, I'm sure it'd be really nice. I'd love to have 5% more money, but you know what? I also need to pay my bills, and so I think we should do that as a nation first before we get excited about just enlivening my own bank account. So security. I have a problem with the idea that you can never have too much security. There's got to be a point at which we have enough security, we can destroy the world. I think that's pretty good security. Do we need to destroy it twice? I don't know. Do we have to have a military that's able to swoop in and take over countries at will? I hope not, because I don't want to actually do that. It used to be in America, if we're going to talk about in the good old days. In the good old days, America didn't keep a large standing army, which was in principles of the founders who hated the idea of a huge standing army, almost more than any other potential source of corruption and power. But of course, we realized that we can't win international engagement, so that's why we have a strong military. So we did. But then what would we do is when we get into war, we'd ramp up the military. We're like, well, we're in a war now, so we're going to spend a lot of money. And then after the war was done, we're like, great, we fixed that. Now let's stand it back down again, and we'll decrease spending and reduce the size of the military. We can always beef it up again later. But after World War II, we stopped doing that. We just decided to become the masters of the world. We'd need a standing army big enough to beat anybody at any time so that we get our way in the world. And that's kind of what we've done. Is that a good idea or a bad idea? I'm a little less certain, but certainly it's a very expensive idea. And I'm not sure we need to continually be expanding what is already, we spend, I think, a third of what the entire world spends on the military, something like that. And compared to any other single nation, we just dwarf them. We're pretty damn safe, to be honest. The little cracks, people with a bomb strapped to the chest can kill some people. That's always going to be the case, but nobody's going to be invading the United States. The military cannot stop all the little teeny ants, right? They're for the big deal, right? And I think they do that just fine. I think we could cut back a little bit. And personally, my view is when we cut back in government, we should do it a little bit everywhere, just kind of slowly ease it back. A little bit less of that kind of like, we need to kill that because I hate it, kill that because I hate it. Just get a bunch of fighting. Look, just everybody should take a little cut. And then, we could discuss a little where our priorities are and shift them about, I think. Immigration, look, I'll just say briefly, in the history of immigration in the country, whenever we've had big booms of immigration, they've coincided with big booms in the economy. because more people come in, they need houses, they stimulate the real estate market, they stimulate the job market, they stimulate the consumer market, because there's just more people doing economic activity. So they grow the overall economy just by their mere presence as economic actors, because everybody in the economy has to buy food, has to seek shelter, has to do things like that. So money churns, and then they do labor, so you increase the supply, you increase the demand, you increase the economic size. So if you want to increase the size of your economy, adding more people is the fastest way to do that. I think what happens is, because they come in and they're kind of poor, and they don't have great cars, and they don't have, they can't buy fancy bicycles, and maybe their houses are kind of crappy. We get upset because there goes the neighborhood, blah, blah, blah. But in truth, it takes time to ramp up inside of a capitalist economy to get your family established, and a lot of immigrant families actually do pretty well over time. Some of them are, some of the hardest working people. So I think the whole immigration thing, now you're talking about legal immigration, it's a little different, has a different metric, right? But I'm for, hey, you expand legal immigration, get more growth in the economy, keep your population growing just ever so slightly, I think is a good thing. Yeah, I'm not for illegal immigration. I'm for a reasonable amount of legal immigration, I guess I'd say. But I think the whole border wall thing is just a dumb idea. It's not a practical way. I traveled the whole U.S. and I spent a lot of time on the border. I saw how they do it now. They're like deserts that are thousands of miles and giant rivers and huge canyons and mountains. A wall doesn't mean crap compared to all that stuff. And the way they actually do it most of the time is they have agents on the major thoroughfares, major roads, not on the border, but inside the United States. And they catch people that way more than anything else, because people got to get on the roads eventually. They can't walk through these giant deserts. So there's a lot more effective ways to stop illegal immigration than building the Great Wall of China on the southern border is just silly. But anyway, yeah, that's my take on all those things. But my major principle is collect the money we need, not cut taxes and hope for the best.
All right. So first of all, yeah. So let's leave immigration. I'm glad you pointed that at the end, the difference between legal and illegal. We can have that debate. We can have I agree that there's a cap on how much we do have to spend on our defense budget. I agree with that. The question is exactly what that is, and I don't know. But I agree with that. I just want to get back to the tax plan over here. You mentioned that. Yeah, you get a 5% increase, but we also have the obligation to pay our dues. But the dues that we're paying are to the people that need it the most. Those people that need it the most are now they're the ones that are also getting that 5% increase. That's where they're getting it. So instead of us just paying the dues, why don't we just let them keep money that they earn? That is the dues. Hey, you only made $5,000, $10,000 this year. You only made $15,000, $20,000. Keep it. Well, I don't want anything from you. And those people will be seeing a 5% increase, which is humongous, which is a very big difference. There's also another couple of things this tax plan we haven't gotten to, and it's a shut. And maybe we'll do a part 2, which I'd love to get to, and that is taking away the deduction of the state tax, where people in low tax states that have low taxes are really reimbursing those that are in states like New York and California that have a high state tax. I think that is really immoral and unjust that people in low state tax, I know it's at the end, and that's why I don't really want to throw it in. I'll give you time at the end. I really want to have another part. Also, the death tax, the state tax, I think is just really unjust. So just because you died, we should take money that was already taxed again, tax you again. I don't believe that's really fair. So there are a number of things in this thing, and this tax plan that does right and does good by the American people and puts us in a better position tomorrow than we were yesterday. It will also post a link, add $800,000 to $900,000 jobs. As much as, yeah, the jobs are increasing, we're having job growth, but more is even better. Putting more income into the hands of the people that are creating the jobs. Not all of them are. Not all money will be to create jobs, but all jobs are created by them. That's fact of the matter. The person making $25,000 a year is not anybody. So I believe it really puts us in a better position than we were yesterday. There are things that I don't agree with this plan. I don't think a plan will come out that I'll agree with everything on, but I do believe in the gist of it, this plan really is really beneficial. I'll let you close with that.
Sure. I just want to talk about the estate tax. I had a whole debate about that. State tax is the best tax there is, because you're taxing money that you got for doing nothing. Instead of taxing money that you earned hard, because you're not taxing a dead man, you're taxing the person who gets the money from the dead man. So that's income you did jack squat for. So we should definitely tax that, compared to income that you worked hard to earn. And the dead person does not lose anything by taxing their money. They're dead. They're gone. They have no need of that money anymore. Can't take it with you to heaven, right? So the estate tax is actually the best, most just, most capitalist tax you could possibly have, because it totally incentivizes working for your money and de-incentivizes sitting on your ass and just getting money for free because your parents are rich. So I think it's the best tax there is, really.
So I'd love to have that. I'd love to have that debate with you. I know we're out of time.
Yeah.
Maybe another time.
Sure. But yeah, overall, again, I'm happy for the poor people to get more money. I'm even happy for rich people to get more money. I don't know why we're giving a big benefit to the rich only to explode the deficit, when what we should really doing is keeping revenue at least even, letting the economy raise that up, and trying to cut spending as well, which we both agree needs to be done. And then that's just a much better thing. This is reckless and irresponsible. Thanks for the debate.
We're out of time. Thanks for the debate. I really enjoyed. I think we should do part 2. I'm